You ask the questions and I'll answer.
So you were born in Wheaton, Kansas?
Mm-hmm.
And where is that?
You know, I don't know if I've been back there since it's a short distance from Topeka, where I grew up. Topeka, Kansas, capital city of Kansas. And that's where I grew up.
What was Topeka like back when you were a kid?
I didn't get around much in the city. My mother didn't drive. Dad was away teaching or whatever. They could only teach in the country towns because they didn't have a license for city teaching. So anyhow, I just remember 1350 Mulvane. That's where I grew up.
What was the house like? Do you remember the floor plan?
Oh yes, it was a two-story house. The first floor, you walked into the hallway, and to the right was a door. And I think that was supposed to be a living room because it had a fireplace, brick fireplace. It had double doors that opened out into the next room. And they made that first room into a bedroom because eventually, I think we lived somewhere else for a while, but anyhow, then you go further into the house and there was the dining room, and then go into the kitchen, and no cupboards, just mother had a cabinet, kitchen cabinet, and a sink with a drain board. Then when I was in grade school, do you want me to go on?
Yeah.
When I was in grade school, we moved to Markley, Kansas, which is a short distance from Osage City, which is a bigger town, and that's where they shopped once a week for the groceries. Anyhow, when we went to see our house, it was covered around it with sunflowers, all in bloom, because we moved there in the summertime, I guess. And anyhow, Dad started cutting down the sunflowers and burning them. And wouldn't you know, the one store they had, grocery store, it burned that summer. So there was a filling station right next door. I don't know what kind. But anyhow, I remember the lady, and she had a certain amount of groceries. And she did have she had cheese and I suppose, a cold counter. And so my dad had chickens. We had chickens, of course, because that's what we eat mostly. And then they also, that first winter, they bought a little pig to grow up for slaughter, for food. Anyhow, once a week, Mom and Dad would go on Saturday to Osage City and buy the grocery supplies they couldn't get there. Well, anyhow, we had chickens, and of course, they laid eggs. And so the lady at the filling station that sold these few, like a slice or a bread or whatever, we'd take it. My younger sister and I would walk down there. It was probably like city time, block and a half, maybe 2 blocks. We were young. I was in grade school. Carmen wasn't even in school yet. Anyhow, we walked down there and give the lady an egg, and she'd give us some candy. We could pick what we wanted. And so we'd do that maybe once a week. That's all the candy we had. And anyhow, I went to, let's see, third and fourth grade there. They didn't have a kindergarten, so Carmen couldn't go to school. But the school, let me tell you about that?
Sure.
It was pretty new. It was all brick. And in the middle, they had this big gymnasium. One side was ninth grade to graduation, 12th grade. The other side was first grade to 8th grade. And so Dad taught on the high school side. He taught math and science and coached basketball teams. And then we had a lady, that Mrs. Beard, I remember that name, and I can almost see her face now. That was a long time ago. Anyhow, she liked to organize these plays, put on skits, and then we would be in, I don't remember what I was, if I was in one, but I thought she was so much fun. I liked her. And anyhow, we lived there for 2 years. We had in the front yard. Well, it was all fenced in, and it was filled with about 5 pear trees. Yeah, and I don't know if it was already there. Dad set it up a swing out there on a stand, you know. And so we'd go out there and sit on the swing, and they'd take pictures. My mother loved to take pictures. I don't know how she afforded it because I couldn't afford a lot of other things. Anyhow, so she canned pears all summer, and she even canned chickens, believe it or not.
Wow.
Is that enough?
Sure. Every once in a while, I might stop and start this camera because it.
Yeah, you tell me when to stop or when to, what to say.
What's the first car that you remember having?
A Dodge. My dad was sold on Dodges. And it had, of course, it was 4 seats. I mean, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And then it had this big trunk on the back end outside, black, I think metal. And he'd put all of our stuff in there, what we had to take on these trips down to our grandparents.
What year was that?
We moved down there, let's see, I would have been 9 or 10. I was born in 31. It would have been I don't know, 40 something, 40, or maybe just 40, because I remember when the Second World War started. But I think by then we were back in Topeka. We just lived in Barkley for 2 years, and I don't know what prompted him to move back to Topeka, except we had no electricity down there and no running water. You had to go to the well, bring it back in buckets, which we did. And I could tell you a lot more, but anyhow, we were so glad to move back to the city and have plumbing and running water and houses around us, because in Barkley we were there sitting alone. But my dad always had a big garden every spring. And that's where Carmen and I had our tea gardens. We'd go out and get vegetables, cut them up into chunks, and have a tea party. It was an experience. I had a good girlfriend, though, and her father was off in the service, I guess. And so they were living there with their grandparents. So she and I would walk home from school every day.
Did you go to high school dances?
Oh, yes. I loved to dance. Yeah. And your dad, he was so musical. He loved jazz music, but yes, I loved to dance. In junior high, do you want to hear about that?
Sure.
Well, 7th grade, well, my father passed away the year before. I was 11. And then the next year I went to junior high. They called junior high school, 7th grade. Well, there was 2 grown sisters that liked to give dance lessons down at the YWCA. And so every Thursday night, Mother didn't drive, but I made friends easily. I always had girlfriends. I love people. And anyhow, the girls' fathers would come pick me up and take us down to the YW, and the teachers would teach us how to dance. Back then it was jitterbug, the waltz, and just the 2-step. I love that. And then any boys or girls could come from all the junior highs in Topeka. But we went to Boswell Junior High, and so first my girlfriend and I think her name was, I don't know. Anyhow, her father would pick me up and take me and bring me home. Well, there was 2 boys that took a liking to me and to my girlfriend. And the one that liked me was Sammy Pitcher. I was very quiet and shy growing up. I always stood in the background and listened. Anyhow, he'd come and ask me to dance the 2-step, you know. And then my girlfriend, John Scovey, asked her to dance. And so she would dance with him. And maybe the girls could dance together, or you could jitterbug, depending on the music. Anyhow, in the 8th grade, of course, my father had passed away, so my mother was left with 5 children. Do you want to hear this?
Yeah.
From 8 to 17, I was 11. I had a younger sister, 2 older sisters, and a brother. I was number 4 in the family. And anyhow, we all had jobs at young ages. I was in the 8th grade when this couple moved to Topeka. I don't know where from. And they built this co-ed theater, neighborhood theater, to show movies. And it wasn't, maybe, I don't know, six or 7 blocks from our house. Anyhow, the first time I went to a movie, I saw Shirley Temple. Cost 10 cents. And we couldn't afford to do that. Anyhow, let's see, Shirley Temple, and then, what was the next one? I forget her name. Anyhow, so when I was in the 8th grade, and I always worked hard at home helping Mother, whatever she was doing. I used to help my dad. He taught me how to wallpaper, how to cut his hair. We'd go out on the back step, and he'd give me the scissors and hold a mirror and tell me how to cut it. Can't believe I did that. Anyhow, and he was so sweet. He was a very loving father, and he'd pat us on the head. And back then, he never spanked us. If we did something that we shouldn't have done, he made us sit on a chair for 15 minutes. Just sit there. And then when the 15 minutes was up, well, he'd go take a piece of bread and butter it with butter, sprinkle sugar, and bring it to us and say, "You can get up now." And he'd pat me on the head and hug me. Anyhow, so that was my childhood, and then junior high.
When you went to dances in the high school, did they have live musicians, or did they play
No.
records?
Records. I never went to a dance with live music. That was probably in high school. And then that's when I met your father. He was my brother's friend. They both worked for the Kansas City Star throwing papers twice a day. And anyhow, so we had to make money, so I ushered at the theater. And this area is called College Hill, and it's in the national, what do you call it, history, you know?
The registry?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you were saying that when you did go to, in high school, they did actually have bands playing at the dances?
Yeah, I think they did, but they were small.
And that's how you met Dad?
Yeah, he didn't dance. His church forbid it. And it's funny, my mother didn't care if I did. And I had a cousin that lived with us for a while, and she and I would dance together to practice. We didn't have any music at home, but we had, there was a little place you could go in and put a nickel in the slot, and it'd play music, and my cousin and I would just, jitterbugger dance. And anyhow, so in high school, I graduated from junior high. High school was too far. Well, it wasn't too far to walk home, but in the morning, my brother was a year older. And so he'd take me to school in his car. But he graduated a year before I did. And then after that, I'd have to take the bus or walk home. But we pretty much had to take care of ourselves. We girls did the cooking and the cleaning up at home, and I worked at the theater till I graduated from high school. Then I had to get a real job. And mother insisted we take typing and shorthand. She said, "You'll always have a job." So I did in high school and did very well in that. So I got a job with State Farm Insurance, working for first I worked for this guy that has his own insurance office. I worked there for a while. And then, I can't remember why I quit, but anyhow, I got a job working for State Farm Insurance after I graduated from high school. and as two claim adjusters, and I had to take dictation. They'd dictate to me, and I'd write it in shorthand on this shorthand notebook, and they'd tell me who to and the address. So then after I'd go out of their office, they'd shut the door, and he'd dictate, and I'd take anyhow, then I'd type it out in letters, and when they handled the bad accidents where people were injured, and so they had to take statements from them. And back then, there were no copy machines, none of this new stuff we have today. And so I had to use carbon paper to make several copies because they had to send copies into the office. And so that's what I did all day. And I made friends with a girl that worked for these 5 lawyers, and then there was one across the aisle that she worked for another insurance man. Anyhow, so the one girl, her name was Virginia. She and I became good friends. And sometimes we go to lunch together, and a lot of times I'd take my lunch.
What was it like to go to a restaurant at that time?
I never went to a restaurant. Couldn't afford it. Did I tell you what I made at the theater? $5 a week for ushering. Then when my sister went off to work for Blue Cross, she graduated from high school, then I took her job as cashier. And I have a picture at home of me sitting I should have brought it to you. Anyhow, selling tickets to the children and the adults. And no automatic machines, but I did have, they had this cash machine where pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters. But you had to know how much change to give back. And so anyhow, then I made $10 a week. And then after I'd worked a year or two, I don't remember, he increased it to $12 a week. But that bought some of my necessities. And of course, high school, we couldn't leave like kids do now. We had to eat in the cafeteria or take our lunch. So I did a little both. Anyhow, and then I graduated in 1949. And they always had big graduations over at Moore Bowl, the football bowl. And they had the junior high girls, which I did this too. Let's see what they call them. There was a name, I forget. Anyhow, we'd wear these pretty formals, and we'd line the seniors would walk through, and we'd line them to make made quite a picture. So I did that the next year I graduated. And they'd have a lot of kids graduating. 700 to 1,000, yeah.
There weren't that many schools back then.
No. In Topeka, there was just Topeka High School where I went, and there was one Washburn Rural out in the country that the kids out in the country went to. In Highland Park, that was the east part of town. That was it.
I don't know, maybe just tell me a little bit about going on dates with Dad.
Oh. Well, anyhow, so he'd come over to see my brother. And with my brother on Sunday, I'll have to back up. Sunday evening, because my mother didn't work that day, she'd stay home in the morning. We all had to go to church. She had rules for us, strict rules. She was a Quaker Friends. Anyhow, so he'd come over to see Charlie, but Sunday, Charlie would bring his boyfriends to enjoy this dinner because Mother made wonderful rolls. She was a good cook. And I forget all the things, fried chicken, if we were lucky. And anyhow, so Kenny, Philip's father's name, Kenny Hawkins, he'd come over with my brother, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he had these beautiful big blue eyes. And we were just attracted to each other, so I just, enjoyed his visits. And then he'd come pick me up at the theater after I worked. And sometimes we'd go drive up and have a 15-cent root beer. That was a treat. And then we'd go home, and we'd go in the house, and my sisters and my brother would be there, and we'd play Monopoly, and what was the other game we played? There was 2 other games, board games. And everybody loved Kenny because he was funny. He laughed, he made jokes, and he made all of us laugh. And losing our father at such a young age, we didn't have much to laugh about because we all had to take so much responsibility. But he made us laugh. And so then we just kept going together. And then I wouldn't see him for months at a time because he lived clear across town. So he'd go with other girls, and I'd go with other boys. And whenever there was a school dance, well, there was a boy across the street that took me to one of the school dance, one or two of the school. Dale Sun was his name. And then there was another boy that he lived down the street, but he went away to the Army. This is during the Second World War, I guess it would have been, yeah, in the 40s. And I can't remember how I met him. Maybe he came to the co-ed. Anyhow, he would take me to dances or downtown to the movie. And then there was another boy in town that lived there. And his sister was one of my girlfriends in grade school, the Hangers. Her name was, let's see, I don't know. Dick Hanger. Jane, that was her name, Jane. Jane and Dick Hanger. So she and I were girlfriends, and we'd play paper dolls together. You know, this is when we were young. Anyhow, later on, when Kenny wouldn't be there, he'd ask me out for a date. We'd go downtown to a theater, see a movie. That was a big treat for me because I didn't get to go downtown. Anyhow, then my sister, my oldest sister, the one next to me that I was closest to, Ernestine, she had a boyfriend, Gilbert, and we would double date. And then we'd go out and make campfires beside a river or lake and roast marshmallows and have hot dogs. And he was a lot of fun, too. And so then when he graduated from high school, he went off to college at K-State. And so we'd take a bus and go there to a basketball game and then come back home that night. I can't believe we did that. When I got to be a senior, he was back going. We were going steady then, really. We decided it was for life. And back then, people got married young, but it stuck. And so we decided that we wanted to get married, but I said, you know what? You got to wait till I graduate and wait a year because I have to save up enough money to pay for a wedding. Help my mother. She couldn't do it all, being a widow. And so we did, and this lady from my husband, Kenny's church, she made over my sister. Mother had 3 weddings in a row. The oldest sister, Carolyn, then me, and then Ernestine. She made over Carolyn's dress, this lady, Mrs. Daggs was her name. It's funny how you remember those old names. Anyhow, she made the bodice different. It was kind of a knit. She took that out and put lace and then a lace collar. And she made me a veil.
So all 3 of you wore the same dress?
Ernestine had to have a new one. But she was working Blue Cross, making more money than I was. Yeah. Your dad and I got married, and we went to Colorado. He had by then, he had a yellow convertible Ford with a black top. And I loved that car. Anyhow, we decided to go to Colorado for our honeymoon. And so we did, and back then you could get a motel for $10 or $15 a night. It was a mom and pop. It's enough, though, You had your own bathroom and everything. So anyhow, we went out there and drove in the mountains, and I had an aunt and uncle that lived out there, Barbara and Herb, and they had 2 daughters, Mary Eileen and Shirley. Yeah. So we went to see them, and they took us to sightsee some and fed us dinner, and we had a good time there. And a year later, when this cousin Shirley got married, she wanted me to come and be a candle lighter. So Kenny was very adventuresome and he'd do most anything at the drop of a hat. And so can you believe, before Christmas it was, drove to Colorado, cold, and what did I wear? I wore somebody else's dress to be in her wedding, candlelighter. And so then when your dad and I got married, after we went to Colorado and came home, we had this little apartment. I was glad to get away from home, because in our home we always had so many people. There was that many kids. You have friends coming and going, and we always had renters upstairs that paid $30 a month for an apartment. And I don't know if I should tell the rest. We had one bathroom. People are so spoiled nowadays. And then we three older girls, we'd all be in there at the same time. One taking a bath, one's brushing their teeth, or they're combing their hair, and the other one's something else. I don't know. But there was a window in the bathroom. You could look out on Mulvane Street. That's where I grew up, 1350 Mulvane Street. That was a nice neighborhood. It wasn't ritzy at all, because we weren't rich, but it was nice. We had nice neighbors. And back then, you knew all your neighbors, and you'd sit out on the front porch, and then they'd come and join you, and you'd visit, and maybe have a glass of Pepsi that had just been started, you know. I thought that was wonderful.
How long before you guys had kids?
Okay, we got married in August. Let's see, August the 5th. My birthday's August 29th, and I was just 19, I guess, because I graduated when I was 18. Yeah, got married in 1950. I think that's right. And got married a year later, and I wanted to be married for a while and just enjoy being married before I started having children. But that's one of the reasons I really wanted to get married. I love babies, children, and I especially love them when they get grown up. But anyhow, it was in 1953 that we had our first baby, Kimba. And that was hard, and they didn't prepare girls back then like they do now. I was scared to death. I sat up all night the night before with small cramps. And anyhow, and I didn't go to the hospital. The next morning, I called the doctor because I didn't know, how soon to go. So I was at the hospital that morning. He said, well, you can go ahead and go to the hospital. So Dad took me, or Kenny, and he sat there, and finally I think he left for a while. And I just laid there in bed, and pretty soon they brought in another lady, and then another lady, and I'm very shy about things like this. So finally that night, I don't remember what time it was, but Kimba was born at 11 o'clock, and all my family, my sisters and my mother, were waiting at home. And so we had decided before she was born, if it was a girl, it was going to be Kimba Sue, from this little neighbor across the street from my mother. Her name was Kimba, only hers was spelled with an E, and I didn't know that, so we named Kimba Kimba, Sue after Carmen Sue. So Kenny called and said, well, it's Kimba Sue. So everybody was thrilled about that. It was a girl, because my two older sisters had already had a boy each. Anyhow.
And you waited a long time before you had another one.
Yeah, I did. It wasn't intentional. So every year I go to the doctor, how come you're not pregnant yet? I thought, I don't know. About 9 years later, I had to have ear surgery. And so first one ear, I had that done, and then after had that done, I went to the doctor again, and he says, you're pregnant. So then, that was 10 years later, Ken was born. So then, got good. We got a girl for me and a boy for Kenny. And about 5 years later, Kimba was going off to junior high. And here I was, going to have another baby. Surprise! We had a little boy. We named him Philip John, because I knew a boy in grade school. His name was Phil, and he was such a nice boy. Just I like people that treat you. How do I want to say it? Politely, honorably, and he was that. Anyhow, we named him Philip John. That was the best surprise I ever had in my life. Look at him now. Anyhow, he was so easy, and of course Ken was 5 years older. Is that right? And Kimba was 10 years older. Is that right? Or am I figuring that right? Okay, yeah. Anyhow, so it was fun, and back in those days, mothers didn't work like they do now so much, and we stayed at home with our babies, and I didn't want to go to work. I wanted to be a home stay-at-home mom.
Tell me about Prairie Road.
Okay, we kept moving up in our house. It started in can you believe this, $5,000 house, $50 a month. Anyhow, then we went to a little California redwood. Then we went to James Street, and that's where Ken and Phil were both born. And then we moved to Prairie Road, and that was 2,200 square feet, a tri-level. Beautiful home with a big brick fireplace and a place built in for your logs. And they built a little balcony off of our bedroom. We had sliding doors. And the builder, he built every house we ever owned, and he and my husband were real good friends. And he traded at his service station when he had that. And anyhow, so every time he'd build a new bunch of houses, why, he'd come talk to Kenny, and of course Kenny wanted to move up. So we did. We moved to Prairie Road, and that was a really nice home. And the boys, I guess they had a bedroom together. And their father built them each of their own beds with a headboard where they could put books or whatever they wanted. And Kimba had the big bedroom. And we had the biggest bedroom with an attached bathroom, and then they had their own bathroom. We had 3 bathrooms in that house, and one down on the ground level as you walked in. It was luxury.
And we had done some boating, but then you decided to put in a pool. How come?
Oh, your dad loved to swim. We went boating. We had 2 different boats. And believe it or not, I learned to water ski, even though I never learned to swim. I tried many times. I'm not relaxed in the water. But first I wore a jacket, and then I wore a wide belt, and we water skied. And Kimba was only 4 years old when we started doing that. Anyhow, we did that. And then finally I think we got rid of the boat, didn't we, before Dad decided he wanted a swimming pool. He wanted his kids all to know how to swim. And I didn't want it because I didn't know how to swim, and I could see a lot of problems, or I thought. Anyhow, but he says, well, we're going to have one. Do you want it this way or this way? I said, okay, this way. So we had a pool built. We had a lot of pool parties. Philip remembers that. We had their birthday parties out there and invite their friends over to swim, and then we'd always have, what do we have to eat? Whatever. Later, beer ox, potato salad, baked beans, of course, birthday cake. I made my own birthday cakes. And I didn't tell you that when your dad and I were going together. On the first birthday that we were going together, I made him an angel food cake. He'd never had a home-baked cake. And so then he came over and we all had a piece, and then I had him take the rest home to his parents. They loved that. So every year I did that. And so I continued it. And I think with the boys, I think they would you like chocolate or white cakes? or just angel food. Anyhow.
I think you got us introduced to the red velvet before
Oh, yeah.
before it was really popular, because
Yeah.
now you can buy the mix.
Right.
But back then you couldn't buy a mix, right?
Mm-mm. No. No, there was no such thing as mixes. There was all these boxes of stuff on the shelves at grocery store with the vegetables, the fruits.
The way it should be.
Yeah. And that's the best food anyhow, I learned. And so I think that we ate pretty healthy because we always had a meat. And of course, I love potatoes, so we had some kind of potatoes, mashed, fried, baked. I love baked potatoes. The sweet potatoes, we had those. Sweet potatoes with ham. They go with ham. And we always had turkey on Thanksgiving, ham at Christmas. Well, you didn't ask me about where you went to high school.
You want to talk about where I went to high school?
Sure.
What about it?
Well, by then they had built a new high school called Topeka West, and it was just about, say, 3 blocks from our house. It's walking. But of course, by then, the kids all had cars to drive to high school, even though they could very easily walk. Kimba walked the first year, and the kids always walked unless it was stormy. But anyhow, so Philip went to Topeka West, and they had, of course, football games, and they always had the band. And he always marched to the band, junior high and high school. And so I'd always go to watch. Well, back up a minute. Your father passed away when you were a sophomore in high school, wasn't it?
A little later, I think I was junior,
Okay.
maybe, or senior.
Anyhow, but I still went to the games with Philip. I'd take him, or I'd go with him, and we'd stay until after the halftime when they did the marching, and then we'd leave. Philip, I think you were in track too, weren't you, in high school? Yeah.
I tried.
Yeah. You were good at walking, and that was good though. And that's the one thing I love to do is walk. And doctors say that's the best exercise for you. But anyhow, he graduated from high school, and then it was college, and they had college night at let's see, where'd they have that at? The high school, wasn't it? Anyhow, they had tables set up in there of the different colleges that you could choose from. And he chose this little Christian college, wasn't it?
Mennonite school.
Mennonite school. Anyhow, so there he went for a year, and I went down to hear the band play. I looked around, and there was, how many of you? 4 or 5. I thought, this isn't Philip. He needs to be in a bigger band. Anyhow, he went there a year. Is that right? And the next year, I think he had a teacher he was still taking drum instructions from. Because he started, did I say you started playing the drum in 5th grade? Yeah, 5th grade. 4th grade, you had to be in the 5th grade to be in the band. I'll back up a minute. And 4th grade, he wanted to be in the band, but they said, no, you have to be in the 5th grade. But they said, you can be in the stringed instrument, what do they call it? Orchestra. So he said, okay. So the teacher, she said, you can play the violin. So he did. He took lessons and played the violin for a year, and then he went back to his drums, and that's where he's at home, and that's where he's good. And I went to every concert. I always used to, this is funny, I have to add this. I used to look around in grade school at the mothers there watching the kids in band, and I thought, I hope they don't think I'm his grandma. Because I was 36 when I had him, and anyhow, most of the others were younger, but his brother liked model airplanes. So when he was in grade school, he started building model airplanes out of balsa wood. And they were probably about this big. And we go over to Washburn College. That was the college in Topeka. And he first, how did he make them fly? Did he have remote control then?
They had control line.
Yeah. And so we'd go over to Washburn College, and then we'd also go over to Gage Park, the park. And they had a place over there for guys like him. And you were so good natured about, you never complained about going over there. And of course, Ken's my son, and I didn't, I did a lot of things with the boys on Saturdays because their dad was always working. Oh,
Well, I think about all the time that he spent in his room building those airplanes.
yes, he did. He spent all his time in there building. Philip spent all his time. We first bought a drum set from his friend's brother, who I guess decided to give up drums. They were red. And so I said, we got to buy those. Philip asked me for, and so we did. So then, and every week I'd take him down to the music shop in Seabrook for his lessons. And then later, I took you to somebody's house where you had lessons. I'd wait out in front. I'd read or whatever while he was having lessons.
Gary Brannaman.
Yeah. What was his name?
Gary Brannaman.
Oh, yes. That comes back to me now. Anyhow. And so then one day, Philip and I were in the music shop for his lesson. We came out. Oh, my eyes got big and I saw this beautiful blue vinyl drum set. Philip's got to have that. That red one doesn't do him justice. So I went home and I told his father, I said, there's a beautiful blue drum set down at the music shop. I forget the name of the music shop, doesn't matter. And I said, Philip's got to have that. He said, well, okay. And so the next week I went down and made arrangements to buy that drum set. And, oh, man, we brought that home. I don't know how we brought it home, if they delivered it or what. But anyhow, we set it up first down in the basement, didn't we? In your room? Okay.
It didn't last long up there.
Well, it was not a big enough room. And so, anyhow, I just sit and listen to him play, and I love that. I think he did too. He loved that drum set, and I did too. And
it was stolen in junior high.
It was stolen? You didn't tell me that. I don't remember that.
You don't remember? At French middle school, they got a phone call. Somebody literally broke through the wall and opened the door and stole that drum set.
What do we do then?
We had to get another one. I think their insurance paid for it.
Probably so. Oh. I don't remember that. Yeah, you had to have a drum set. Anyhow, what was the next one? Was it that clear one?
The gray one.
Yeah.
That we bought.
I kind of remember that, but I didn't remember that your other one was stolen. Anyhow, you played up all through high school, and then, like I say, that first college that he went to, or Mennonite school. I went down there to hear him play, and I think they were having some kind of a baseball game or something that day. And I looked around and I said, is this the band? This isn't good enough for Philip. So I said, you got to go somewhere else. So. And his teacher that was giving him lessons then said, Philip, you don't belong here. He says, you need to go to Wichita State where they have a real band. So the next year, that's what he did. So they had a real band. And you had a good teacher down there too, didn't you? So that's where he went and graduated. And, well, he decided he wanted to teach, and so you had to go an extra year. I think you went 2 years. You went to school there 7 years. And he worked all through that time to help pay for it because his father was gone. And, well, I'll back up. His father went into real estate. And when he saw that he had cancer and he was probably not going to make it, he says, you need to get your real estate license. Do you want to hear this?
Sure.
And so I went to classes, learned all about real estate, and he coached me. And so they had classes at Washburn University. You had to go over there, and they put you sat one person there and no person here, and chair in between each of you so you wouldn't cheat. But I wouldn't have dreamed of cheating. That I couldn't do that with a clear conscience. And anyhow, so I took the test, answered the best I could, best I knew how. And so one day, your dad and I, when I was working at the real estate office, he'd take me out to lunch. That was my pay. And I'm serious. And so one day we came home. I don't remember what time it was. And I took the mail out of the mailbox and I said, "Oh, here's a letter from the Real Estate Commission." And he said, "Huh? That means you passed." He was surprised. I was thrilled. I didn't have to do it again. Anyhow, so then I started selling real estate.
I'll tell you a story
Okay.
that you may not remember. The day that Dad died, I was scheduled to audition at Washburn University for a scholarship. And it happened literally like an hour before that audition. And I remember the pastors and everybody came over, and I said, what should I do? And the pastor said, "Well, why don't you go and do it?" And I think he wanted to get me out of the house because they were going to have to move Dad out of the house. And so Ken drove me over there.
Yeah.
And I was talking to these guys who were trying to get me to go to Washburn, and they were, "Hey, Philip, how you doing? Hey, welcome. Hey, we're so glad to meet you." And my dad died an hour ago. And I did the audition because what else are you going to do? You imagine that? Crazy.
You know what? Can I add a little bit about my faith? I have a lot of faith about God and Jesus. And I prayed a lot for my kids and for our family. And I prayed that God would help me through every situation and guide me. And I feel like He did, because everything that happened worked at the time it didn't seem like it, but it worked out for the best. So, for both me and my kids.
Nice.
Yeah, so then you switched to Wichita State and
The rest is history.
went extra time so he could teach, because I told him, "Philip, you need a degree so you can teach." And you had to get a master's, didn't you? Or what was it? Yeah. So he's done well at everything he tries. But
Even interviewing.
yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Is that enough, or you
Yeah,
want to
that's fine.
hear more?
I don't want to wear you out. But it's good just to get some of
I
the
like to talk about it. I like to remember